we're beginning a new group, this dialogue and transmission session, and it's focused on a little booklet called Practical Spirituality. In this booklet are a series of questions asked of Marshall Rosenberg about his own spiritual journey and how it impacted him developing nonviolent communication. So we'll go over those questions and answers. And also, besides learning about what Marshall was experiencing, we'll ask the same questions of ourselves. And then after we're through with our dialogue, we'll ask our celestial family to make some comments. So to begin, let's start with a prayer and a quiet stillness. And would you be willing to lead the prayer, John?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Our beloved divine family, we seek your company and we invite you to join with us today as we explore further our spirituality and our relationship to you. We ask that you open our minds and our hearts to see the path for further growth and development, and also to simply enjoy one another. We create this space because we love each other and we wish to learn more about the Father and Mother and their will for us. And so we ask that you help us to quiet our minds, to open our hearts, and to be available for the insights that you might gently place before us. We thank you for your willingness to make these connections with us. We pray that this kind of effort will also reach out and have a greater effect on those in our community and in the world itself. Thank you.
And let's take a few moments and just be quiet in our stillness to make contact with our own divine indwelling spirit. Well, I did a little bit of journaling last night. Before I went to bed, I did some stillness, and afterwards I realized, oh, that is kind of like an answer to some of the questions, one of the questions asked of Marshall Rosenberg. So you got the book, correct, John?
Yeah, I bought the Kindle version, but I have it here in front of me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll go through the questions and probably even just read what Marshall said, because anyone who's listening to the video wouldn't necessarily have the book and know. And so the first question is, how do we connect with the divine through nonviolent communication? And I'll read Marshall's answer. I think it is important that people see that spirituality is at the base of nonviolent communication, and that they learn the mechanics of the NVC process with that in mind. It's really a spiritual practice that I'm trying to show as a way of life. Even though we don't make a point of mentioning this, people get seduced by the practice. Even if they practice NVC as a mechanical technique, they start to experience things between themselves and other people they weren't able to experience before. So eventually, they come to the spirituality of the process. They begin to see that it's more than a communication process and realize it's really an attempt to manifest our spirituality. I have tried to integrate the spirituality into the practice of NVC in a way that meets my need not to destroy the beauty of it through abstract philosophizing. The kind of world I'd like to live in will require some rather significant social changes. But the changes that I'd like to see happen probably won't happen unless the people working toward them are coming out of a different spirituality than what has led to the predicaments we're in now. So our training is designed to help people make sure that the spirituality that's guiding them is one of their own choosing and not one they've internalized by the culture, and that they proceed in creating social change out of that spirituality. So right now it's focused on the spirituality of NVC, and he's right that in the book it's not directly stated as a spiritual practice, but if you're desiring to connect deeply with people through a understanding of their core needs that you all have in common, and a compassion for how they feel and how they desire to have those needs be filled so that they can live a more rich, robust life. Well, that is a spirituality practice. When I went to a workshop for NVC many, many years ago, there were quite a few people who didn't really profess to believe in God, but they were very much attracted to NVC. So it's really not trying to get people in line to believe the same way, but to have the same desire to connect deeply with other people. And I think that connection with others on that most, what would we call that level? Most heartfelt level is kind of like the essence of what you and I know through the Urantia book as contributing to the Supreme Being, which is that which unifies all of us in this reality that we're in of time and space. So maybe you want to comment more on that, and I'll let you have your turn.
My experience of the first book that I read with him that we did last time was that this is a deeply emphatic process. You have to have empathy to do nonviolent communication, and then empathy, requires you to see the other person not as other or different, but as a human being that's part of the same, kind of human family that we all belong in, whether that's a spiritual, vision, or whether that's just, a general kind of seeing people are not separate and they're worthy of our time and attention and of our help, and that it meets a need in each of us to try and do something to help other people and to live from a point of view of, a kind of a generalized love of humanity, And so it's the same process. It's just the words that we lay on it sometimes, cause perhaps misunderstanding or misalignment, but at a much deeper level, it's the essence of recognizing in that other person something that we're recognizing in ourselves, that we all have a need for love, for compassion, to be understood, to be able to, be vulnerable enough to articulate our needs and expect that the other person will be sympathetic enough to listen and hopefully want to help us. And I think that when he says, you want to manifest the spirituality without overtly philosophizing, and give people a way to do that, really it's a way to manifest all of that without adding words that tend to create confusion and division and all of that. So it's to me, I always recognized it as a spiritual process because it's the process I'm going through. So I think it's valuable to learn this process because it's simply a technique of communicating your love for other people and finding a way to do something. And he mentions that he talks about, to him, spirituality isn't something that you think about or, it's not a theory, it's something that you do. And NVC is an incredibly practical doing. So I think that is always been my understanding of him, is that somehow behind his teaching at NVC, he must be a very spiritual person. And now we look at this book, the spiritual basis of nonviolent communication, and it's just he's being very candid about it is a spiritual process, and he's always thought of it that way, and he's tried to come up with a way to teach that would be acceptable to the greatest number of people. And I think he did a great job.
Yes. Well, so do I. And I agree with you. We're going to get a deeper insight into Marshall while we look at these questions and see how he answers them. And then we attempt to answer them for ourselves. So why don't we look at the next one? They come right out and they ask him, what does God mean to you? Would you like to read his response?
Sure. What does God mean to you? Marshall, I need a way to think of God that works for me. Other words are ways to look at this beauty, this powerful energy. And so my name for God is beloved divine energy. For a while, it was just divine energy. But then I was reading some of the Eastern religions and Eastern poets, and I loved how they had this personal loving connection with this energy. And I found that it added to my life to call it beloved divine energy. To me, this beloved divine energy is life, connection to life.
I know the common term is God, and it's useful when you just want to communicate a concept, what we're talking about to someone you don't know too well. But it isn't very personal. And so it's interesting how he evolved his understanding of divine energy because he wanted that personal relationship, which is NVC, is getting into the real deep personal relationships with people. And I know probably of some of the Eastern poets he's talked about from other books that I've read. And yes, they have this really deep, passionate relationship that they wrote about with their divine creator. So I thought that was interesting how he evolved his concept. Do you have a favorite term for God? And how has it evolved over the years for you, how you address the Creator?
Yeah, the word God was a common word in my home because my father was a minister. And growing up in a very fundamentalist, evangelical sort of Christian tradition, God has a lot of baggage for me. And so I didn't like it for a long time. I like to use the word creator uh, because that implies, as a creature, a relationship. I also love the word my beloved. I simply sometimes use my beloved as that term. Jesus used the term father, and as a male, I get it. As a father, I get that. But it's also sometimes off-putting, to others because it's seen as sexist when we always refer to God as he. And so using words like creator, avoid that. And that's the only really useful word context for the word God because it's gendered. It's a non-gendered term. So I just feel like it doesn't really matter to God or to our creator, to our beloved, what we call him. It only matters to us.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really important for people to find a name that um, evokes a personal living relationship, whatever that name is in your culture, however you would do that, whatever gender, it doesn't really matter as long as it opens your heart, to a living relationship with a being that's not an abstract. It's not an abstract idea. It's a relationship.
Mhm. If I am just going to have my personal moment with our divine parent, I will say Father, or I'll say Beloved. If I'm speaking to other people, I try to use a term that, like you, it might be the divine creator of all that is. It gets a little wordy sometimes. But like you said, the Father isn't that concerned with having a name. In fact, how do you name something that huge, magnanimous? There's a name is meant to embody the what the whole entity is valued at and what it means. And it's hard to put a value on something so immense. So last night, I asked Father, how would you like me to see or understand you? So that was my question, because at one time I had asked our universe, Mother Spirit and Father Michael, to show me how they see me, because I knew how I was often seeing myself, which wasn't often very fair of me, not very compassionate at times. But this time I wanted to know, well, Father, how would you like me to see and understand you? And if you don't mind, I'd like to read what I wrote down last night.
Absolutely.
And by the way, hi, Bob. We're looking at the second question. What does God mean to
Hi.
you? So I'm going to read a little um, transcript I wrote, when I stilled myself last night and I asked the Father to comment on my question. So
That's great.
my child, you asked me how I want you to see or understand me. I love this question. Every person, even divine ones, desire to be known as they truly are. As you are aware, many misperceptions about your divine parents and cosmic family persist on your world. As your source, I know the difficulty finite minds have in understanding the vastness of my being. And yet, even young souls such as yours can feel my love and yearn to be more like me in truth, goodness, and beauty. I am satisfied with your baby steps. But since you asked, I will meet you at a place of understanding that will thrill you to continue this journey with me and to me. For I know you as an essential part of my being. By saying this, you have become aware that to know me as I would be known is to know yourself as I know you. Let's explore this delightful mystery together, and with patience, you will see me in you. I thought, wow, that was not what I expected, that I will come to understand the Father by first coming to understand myself. And not just my human self, but the divine nature that he implanted within me, that is the essence of his spirit, because that in itself is quite vast. It will take a long time to fully access all of those potentials. It's like our divine DNA. with an intelligence to guide us to know God and to become more like him and her. I agree. The male and female pronouns now seem a bit unwieldy to me, but we don't seem to have a neutral pronoun except for they or them that is a personal one. And I definitely want a personal pronoun and not an it.
Well, and
Anyway,
we're a planet that, we were created as sexual beings, male
yes.
and female. And so it's just part of it. And I think I interchange them sometimes, even when I'm TRing. One time I'll call him he, next time I'll call him she. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So Bob, did you want to add your 2 bits to what does God mean to you? That was the second question. What name do you give to God that's a personally, something that you relate to?
Well, I think God's, like you say, very vast. So I like the simple term of first source and center.
Mhm. And have
And
you
that,
done,
and that to me covers it.
oh, okay. But did you see an evolution in your concept of God when you first were introduced as a child to where you are now? Um,
Oh, definitely. I saw him as kind of an old man when I was young, and I didn't think of God as being as vast as he really is. That came later. Before the Urantia book, but later. I saw God later as the cosmic all, and that was pretty vast. I was into astronomy. I had astronomy as a hobby, and I just saw how vast the universe was and how great he created it. And I thought, man, he's got to be huge.
most definitely, if the creation is huge.
I was looking at this photo of from the James Webb Space Telescope
Mhm.
last night, and it was like a picture. And it was just basically lots and lots of incredible points of light just all over the place.
They're all galaxies. Yeah.
Yeah. And what they were saying is that's like 10 million galaxies. And then they go on to say, but that's like looking at the night sky through the end of a straw,
Mm.
as
Yep.
far as
Yep.
how much they're able to capture in that picture. And they go on to put these incredibly huge numbers, gigatons and whatever, to um, the vastness of creation and estimating how many planets are probably Earth-like and inhabitable and all that. It's just this incredible number that they can put 17 zeros behind it, but it doesn't really mean anything. And so you see that it's incredibly, the physical creations almost is beyond comprehension, really. It's so vast. And so it's not hard to imagine, of course, that there's other worlds like ours out there with intelligent beings on them. And so God is that's an aspect of God, but the way that I've come to know that is to study Jesus and how he related to God. It was always this incredibly personal relationship, which he would use the term our Father, but he would always encourage his apostles and others to have a personal living relationship. God is available to you. Talk to him. He's like a sympathetic, father, only much more. And you can bring your problems and your concerns to him. You can talk to him. You can have a conversation with him. He hears you. And so, you know, um, it's so incredibly personal once I begin to have this experience of this living connection with our Father that although terms like the first source and center, which I also use, and creator are less personal. That's why I often think of him as my beloved, my friend, and then in a very loving way, someone who is protecting me, who is nurturing me, who has my best interest at heart, all those kind of attributes, love, truth, beauty, goodness. And then when I look at other people, oftentimes I remind myself as a way of not trying to judge people that I have no idea what their backstory is. I don't know really anything about them. But the only thing I do know about them is that they are also indwelt by the creator, the spirit of our creator, and the Father lives within them like he does me. And so then that puts it on a very different foundation, seeing through all the things that I might judge and seeing them as in a spiritual sense, kind of like my brother or my sister. And then I can feel that empathy for them. And then nonviolent communication makes sense. The empathy makes sense, wanting to be available to that person in a way that, maybe I can do something good for them, and hoping that, we can have this personal relationship based on this genuine respect for one another and for ourselves. And of course, it's not always possible. A lot of people don't really give much attention to their spiritual growth and development. But when you connect with those that do, it's at that level, it's usually very gratifying. And it certainly meets the need of mine.
Well, looks
Yeah.
like, were you wanting to say more on that, Bob?
Yes, I was. I just imagining the size of the universe. The Urantia book was written in the 1920s and 30s mostly, and that's when they had a very small view of the universe. They just only knew a few galaxies. And think of it now, and there's billions, even maybe trillions of galaxies, and in each one of those, there's hundreds of billions of stars with hundreds of billions of planets, and it's just kind of mind-boggling because how many of those planets are inhabited, and how the trillions of planets that are inhabited, and the millions and billions of people on each planet. God is within each and every one of them and knows each one and every one of them individually. That's what really boggles my mind, just thinking about that. I just said they're awesome, and that's so awesome that just we can't even comprehend the vastness that's involved. And also the great sense that just you and I individually are loved and cared for by Him. Out of each one of those billions of people and trillions of planets, He knows about each one of us and cares about each one of us. And that's just so fantastic. So awesome.
And we struggle even using NVC to make that kind of connection with a single person. And our divine parent, creator of all, he has made that connection with all of the beings in his vast creation. So let's move on to the next question, if you're willing. Marshall was asked, what is your favorite way of knowing beloved divine energy? And Rosenberg answered, it is how I connect with human beings. I know beloved divine energy by connecting with human beings in a certain way. I not only see divine energy, I taste divine energy, I feel divine energy, and I am divine energy. I'm connected with beloved divine energy when I connect with human beings in this way. Then God is very alive for me.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, did you want to comment more on it, Bob, and talk a little bit about how you personally connect with the first source and center?
I would. I love to. I sort of see Him as a light of truth and a light of love and a light of joy. and enlightens my mind and my heart and my soul. And it's that light that's so prevalent, that's so very endearing as well as very personal. And it's something that helps us realize that God, even though as vast as He is, has a relationship with you and I. And wants that relationship with each one of us to the full extent that we're able to have that relationship. And we have to spend some time at it. We have to spend some time. It would be great if we do it daily. Not everyone does, but if we do it daily, it'd be wonderful. If we just take some time and spend some time with God and spend some time with our guardian angels and spend some time with Michael and Abadonia. And just show them that we appreciate them and that we're so dependent on them in many ways, but also at the same time realizing that they've given us much autonomy and much capability on our own to accomplish things on this planet that we can, and that we can go about doing the work that they want us to do to make things better for our fellow humans as well as ourselves. I feel that God is at the center of all of that, and that developing a relationship with Him is tantamount to having a get out of jail free card, more or less, like in Monopoly. You just really have unfettered dominion over your life and what you're doing in life and how you're developing your life, especially with God in it and centered on Him.
Well, given how Marshall answered it, how would you answer it, John, on your favorite way of knowing the beloved divine energy?
My favorite way is through my stillness practice and the part of that practice that I devote to just worshiping Him. And it's a kind of a wordless practice. It's just the presence. It's the sense of gratitude. It's a sense of open-heartedness, but feeling His divine presence in that moment. So that's a kind of my favorite personal way of doing it. And then, of course, trying to be present with people as this divine love as best I can. And more and more, particularly, it happens with my family, just looking for things to do that they need to have done and just doing them, just, making myself available to help my kids if I'm down there taking care of things with them, we're visiting, or whatever. And then to kind of push that out into the world a little bit. It's difficult, because once you're kind of in the world and you're doing things with people, there's so many distractions and at so many different levels. It's sometimes hard for me to always remember that, I want to feel the divine in them and connect with them that way. But when I can, it's wonderful. And I like that too, and I think that's the impetus for the stillness practice is to take it out. I mean, it's one thing to regenerate myself and balance myself and take that time for inner spirit to speak with me and to listen and to pray, for things that I feel are important. But then to take that out and do something with it other than just enjoy it for myself. And I really like that part of his explanation here where he, it's something you do. He wants spiritual life and practice to be something that you do and try to help other people, feel the connection with other people and to do something good for them, and I really like that about his approach to it, because to me that's really resonates with how Jesus, emphasized how important service is. That you grow spiritually by serving other people. And with Marshall, he doesn't overtly say that so much, but it's just there throughout his whole nonviolent communication. You're doing something for somebody else. You're there as an act of service out of love. And it's just knowing God that way through loving other people and trying to overcome my own limitations to love. That's to me a very personal way of knowing God, because when I fail, I get to learn. And that growth, to know that it's being guided by God and it's an intelligent process. I love it because it gives meaning to it. Failure isn't something to be ashamed of. Failure is something to be embraced and to learn from, because life has purpose and meaning, and it's a process of growing.
Well, you both hit upon something that resonates for me too. If you want to know something, you have to make time to be with that something and be deeply with it. Seek to have that strong connection. Relationships can't thrive when you don't make time for those you want to be in relationship with. And so the same is true if you want a relationship with the divine. You have to make time. You have to set aside some time for your stillness or your worship practice, your prayer practice, to make a connection. But then we also want to connect throughout the day, and that's where I kind of match up with what you said, John. That's where you're making connections with other people by being of service in some way, which to me is giving the Father permission to be expressed through my life so that it has a positive and uplifting impact on others. I've told God and many times that I want to be his love messenger, because if there's one thing people in this world lack most of in their personal experiences, is that really deep, non-judgmental kind of love that just lets them be as they are, with all of their flaws, and just see them as a child in process of growing into their spiritual potential. And so it doesn't matter where they're at in their flawed state, as long as they're in motion to move forward and not stagnating on the drawing power of the material world, which wants to put your focus on things that no longer exist when you die. They will no longer exist in your life, and yet you cling to them fiercely while you are alive. So it's not that we should dispense with meeting those material needs and those material pleasures, but everything needs to be put in its best balance. And we can't have the true fullest appreciation of even our material life if we cut ourselves off from experiencing the love of the Creator. If we don't get that experience, it's the one that encompasses everything and gives it all purpose, gives it meaning and value. So yes, my favorite way is also making time to be with the beloved Father, but also making time to cherish his other children and see in what way I can contribute to the well-being of others.
Well, one thing I think that I really like about nonviolent communication is emphasis on relationship.
Yes.
It's all about relationship. And I look around this world and you see relationships everywhere. All of creation is just built on these relationships. In the animal kingdom, in the human world, nothing on its own survives for very long as an isolated entity.
Mhm.
And so nonviolent communication really, without saying it, emphasizes the value of relationship. It doesn't happen without relationship, And so, when you use a word like creator or beloved, it implies relationship. A creator creates creatures. There's a relationship there. Beloved, love can only happen between two personal beings. It doesn't happen abstractly. And so Rosenberg really puts that focus as a part of doing is on relationship. It's always brought into relationship to another. And I think it's very powerful, and a great focus for spirituality.
Well, we could do one more question if you want.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll still ourselves and listen to one of our divine parents or other celestial teachers.
Okay.
So this question is, what religious beliefs, teachings, or writings have had the greatest influence on you? And well, here's what Rosenberg said, because I don't think he knew about the Urantia book. It's hard for me to say which of the various religions on the planet have had the most impact on me. Probably Buddhism, as much as any. I like so much of what I understand the Buddha or the people who quoted the Buddha to be saying. For example, the Buddha makes it very clear, don't get addicted to your strategies, your requests, or your desires. That's a very important part of our training, to not mix real human needs with the way we've been educated to get those needs met. So be careful to not get your strategies mixed up with your needs. We don't need a new car, for example. Some people may choose a new car as a strategy for meeting a need for reliability or peace of mind. But you've got to watch out because society can trick you into thinking it's the new car that you really need. This part of our training is very much in harmony with my understanding of the Buddha. Almost all of the religions and mythologies I've studied say a very similar message, one that Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, summarizes in some of his work. Don't do anything that isn't play. And what they mean by play is willingly contributing to life. So don't do anything to avoid punishment. Don't do anything for rewards. Don't do anything out of guilt, shame, and the vicious concepts of duty and obligation. What you do will be play when you can see how it enriches life. I get that message from my understanding not only of the Buddha, but also from what I have learned from Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. I think it's a natural language. Do that which contributes to life. I know that each of us began our spiritual journey with some kind of religious text or some type of philosophies that were meaningful to us. And then we explored what was available. So let's each take a turn and talk about that exploration process and what teachings have had the greatest influence on you. Would you like to start, Bob?
Okay. I'll say that my thinking matured when I read the Urantia book. That was back in 1992. About 2000 something or other, it was early in the 2000s. I became aware of the teaching mission and the correcting time. And I followed the voice of Dan Raphael closely at that time, as well as some others. And that's what really made an impact on me, that God and his celestial beings were in contact with us directly and were answering questions directly, and that they were involved with humanity in a way that we were individually involved with them, and that they were actually there for us. That made a huge difference in my life, because I knew that not only did God care, but his whole organization, his whole universe cares basically, and that every one of them has a love for each other and for us. And that opened my mind to possibilities that I had never thought of before. And I felt like I wasn't alone, that I was with many, and that they were all on the side of God. Well, majority of them. There's a few miscreants like Lucifer and Satan, but for the most part, everyone's for God because they realize it's the right way, the best way, and the only way that they can live to grow to be their best selves and best they can be for one another, their friends and everything. And so it just gave a whole different aspect to life to me, that the universe is vast, but it's a loving universe, and that is individually caring for each of us.
Thank you, Bob. Of course, all of us here have a similar experience with the Urantia book and the teaching mission. John, why don't you talk about your evolution that was influenced by beliefs and other teachings that you came upon?
Well, I think I was in some ways very fortunate because I grew up in a house where God was not in doubt. God was a familiar conversation. My father was a preacher. He had his holy book that he, used as more or less an authority for his beliefs and the way he taught. And as a child, I just grew up knowing that God was real. Was never in doubt. It was just assumed that God was real. I ended up outgrowing those concepts that I learned pretty early on because there was just some huge discrepancies in them in terms of, the guilt and the shame and the sin. And that never made sense to me. But what did make sense to me was the parts of the Bible that talked about Jesus and his teachings. I always had this kind of natural affinity for that. So when I left home, I was kind of throwing all of that away, and I was lost, and I was getting more lost. And then chance encounter, I did find the Urantia book, and that was immensely impressive to me. Just the first time I found that book, and it seemed to answer so many questions. So for many years, I just read it and read it and read it over and over. And I really loved that book because it provides such a context for spirituality. But it only goes so far. It doesn't really give much personal instruction on how to. It kind of really lays out the big context of the picture and what's out there and all of that. So I was ready when I heard about people in my Urantia study groups would say, "Oh, have you heard that people in the Urantia movement are receiving message from celestial beings?" and you got to watch out for these people, make sure you stay away from them and don't get involved with that. And I'm like going, oh, I got to find out who these people are. I want to talk to them. So I did that, and then I got in touch with, Daniel Raphael, what Bob mentioned. For years. I, would go to his, online Zoom things. I would read his transcripts, and then George Bernard was another big influence, because he wrote a lot and put together the 1111 Progress Group, and they put out a lot of transcripts. There was the people up in Idaho. There were just people all over the place. Donna D'Angelo, would read her transcripts, and this was everywhere, all over the place. Down in Florida, there were people. There were just, and you could get these transcripts if you look, and then the people were putting databases together of all these transcripts. So I would say that along with the Urantia book, these transcripts had a huge impact on me, because in the early days of the teaching mission, they really taught. There was a pretty big focus on stillness practice. How do you connect with this indwelling spirit? It's more than just an idea. You can have this conscious contact or connection with your indwelling spirit. And that was very appealing to me. And so, Chris Morris's teachings, he's got like 12 transcripts that kind of lay out the process that he used to connect with his indwelling spirit to make conscious contact. And I read that and reread it and studied it and tried to put it into practice along with the other teachings in the teaching mission, and achieved that conscious contact, with my indwelling spirit. And so I would say that the influence of the Urantia book provided the context, but the teaching mission transcripts provided the how-to. And so all of it's a process of evolution. Everything contributed. And now I feel that it's just immensely valuable to be able to have a teacher, to connect with your guardian angels, to be able to have these celestial beings be a real presence in my life, and receive transcripts from them, get them from other people that are TRing, and it's just a wonderful thing. And so I would say that between the Bible, the Urantia book, and the teaching mission transcripts, that's been kind of the influences in my life that have brought me here. Along the way, I read many other books. Eckhart Tolle, I read The Power Now probably 8 or 9 times, because it made so much sense about trying to be in the present moment. I read Buddhist and Islamic teachings, and the Hindu, the Vedas and the Rig Vedas, and the other Vedic, scriptures and stuff like that in my seeking. But the ones that stuck with me are the Urantia book and the teaching mission.
So I guess it's my turn. As a child, of course, I was raised in a Christian religion. It was probably more non-denominational because my father was in the Air Force, and a lot of what we had on base was either Catholic or non-denominational, so that it would hopefully meet the needs of the different Christian sects. I was fortunate that in my family, things weren't crammed down my throat, that I was never told on a regular basis of what a sinner I was. Though I heard it, being discussed in church or Sunday school, but it wasn't pushed on me intensely. Even so, as a child, I did grow up thinking there was something I needed to be fixed in me. And whether that had to do with my early religious training, or whether it just had to do with other things that would get exposed to about how we view ourselves, I don't have an answer for that. But I know that around age 11, my spiritual life was quickening, and I spent, I did my prayers at night, and there was an evolution through that, where I would do 3 prayers, 2 by rote and 1 I made up. And I began to realize that, like Jesus had realized, he wasn't getting that connection, feeling of connection with the divine by just saying a prayer by rote. He needed to have his own conversational prayer with God. And that's where I came to think at age 11, and I decided to get rid of my other rote prayers and just make up my own each time. And I went through a little bit of guilty feeling, like, oh, something's not right here if I'm not doing that. It's like I must make the sacrifice. But I did let it go. And then I was 16. I was still in this mode of desiring to know God better. And I studied the Gospels on my own. I really wasn't interested in much of the other aspects of the Bible. I wanted the stuff that had Jesus in it. And I felt unhappy with myself that there didn't seem to be enough passion for everything that I read. There were some aspects I thought, I don't really like that version of God when it's said that way. And I thought, well, it can't be that the book is wrong. It has to be that I'm wrong. There is something wrong with me. So, dear God, please fix me. I want to have more passion for Jesus and you. And along came the Urantia book into my life. I didn't go seeking for it, but within 6 months or less, this book walked into my home in the hands of my then boyfriend. And he says, you've got to look at this. And I opened it up and read the very first page, and my truth bells were ringing so loud. I said, can I keep this to read it? And he says, of course. And I read the whole thing from beginning to end, not comprehending much of a lot of what I was reading, but determined that I was going to read it all. And it's been in my life ever since. And I've grown in my ability to comprehend more of it. Then in the early 80s, I had a powerful dream that I think foretold the coming of the celestial teachers to be as mentors, is the way I look at it, to us humans. And I didn't know it at the time that was the dream was about that, but it was showing that up in the heavens above, the stars were moving suddenly very rapidly. And out of the starry heaven came these beautiful orbs of light drifting down to the planet. And one came to me. And I could tell it was intelligent. There was an intelligent being there. And so from that, in the 90s, I came to be aware of the teaching mission when I finally found a group that studied the Urantia book. That was the first conversation they had, this announcement of the teaching mission. And I was not sure I wanted to buy into that, but I was told by one person to keep my mind open, just read the transcripts and then make up my mind. And I did that, and I gravitated toward it. And I was lonely for 2 years because there was no teaching mission in my town, active group. Even though this one was inquiring, the one that was studying the Urantia book, they weren't really going wholeheartedly into being a part of the teaching mission. And I asked Jesus to not forget me. And lo and behold, I got invited to the first Spirit Fest in California of teaching mission groups getting together to share their experiences. And none of those people knew really who I was, but my name got recognized by a person who then gave it to the organizers, and they invited me. And that was the beginning of the teaching mission in my town, because I brought back all those transcripts, and by then the group I was in was only very small. None of the original people were there anymore. And a member of that group says, I want to be a part of this. And his wife joined him in that. And so we began our own teaching mission group. So I've been involved with the teaching mission since the early 90s. And I've been through its various transformations. I haven't always been heavily active, but I've connected up with certain people, just like you, John, and Bob. My primary one was Donna D'Angelo, to keep me in the loop. And I've developed my own ability to some level to receive messages, mostly on my own, through journaling, but also sometimes with groups. I've come to the point where I don't really desire to just sit and listen to a bunch of TRs speaking. I've come to a position where I want to utilize the lessons that they've given so that I can have a positive impact on my world. But I also have come to realize that by making time to receive transmissions, I'm building that connection that we already talked about. That relationship requires a commitment of being available to have a conversation with these beings who are invisible to us. And so I still want to be a part of TRing, which is, for those who aren't familiar with it, this is our transmitting and receive a message, and we transmit those words to those around us or on paper. I still want to be a part of that because I want to make time for that relationship. And I think of the teachers as being like mentors. Because you're right, John, the Urantia book didn't really give us a bunch of personal how-tos, because those are already out there. If we wanted, we could have studied meditation through Buddhism and other, religious New Age groups or whatever. But it's the teachers that, as Bob came to understand, that really reveal through their own modeling their own experience for us of how they relate to each other and how they relate to us, that I think had the biggest impact on helping me to accelerate my spiritual development. And then through all of that, then I have filled in missing gaps. I've learned more about Buddhism. I've learned more about the other religions. I've read a little bit in many of them, but it's still always the Urantia book and the teaching mission that stays steady as my spiritual nourishment. If we threw away all the books in the world, we threw away all the spiritual texts, we still could receive revelation directly from the divine, because our Heavenly Father has chosen to send a piece of himself to live within us. And that core truth is what the Urantia book gave me that I did not have, that has had absolutely the most powerful influence on my life, that I can talk to God within me. And instead of always searching for him outside of me. And then that little, tidbit I got last night, that if I really want to know God as he wants to be known, I've got to learn to know myself as he knows me. And that was a powerful moment for me. I know God by delving into my deepest part of myself and building that connection with the divinity within me, but also accepting the humanity of me, my mortal nature too, with all of its imperfections, because that tells me a lot about God as well, and that he cherishes those. It's a part of our spiritual growing up. And it's not something to disdain.
Yeah, it's also a part of self-revelation that God's going through, so to speak. You know, it's not possible for a perfect being to do the non-doable. So, in order for God to experience becoming perfect, He chose to create beings like us, deliberately imperfect, immature, and then turn us loose in the cosmos with free will.
Turn us loose, literally.
Yeah. And
Crazy
then,
things we do with that free will.
yeah, but that's all part of it. You know, that's all part of the creation. And luckily, and not a lot of creation takes the route that Urantia did, you know, and uses free will and such destructive means towards the creation itself and other human beings. But it has to be there as a possibility for free will to be real. But through all of it is His love, God's love. And He allows it all to happen. It all happens within the context of that divine love. And we get to become these autonomous co-creators of reality. Limited at first because of our imperfection, but as we grow, there will be no limits on that. And we will co-create with God reality on ever enlarging scales. And so, you know, that kind of idea comes out of the Urantia book, because if you have a fragment of the spirit of this creator living within you that you are to one day fuse with and become a new being, and then you have access to all the attributes of that spirit, well, that is having access to all the attributes of our creator. And we'll never exhaust that. We'll always be growing forever in an infinity of eternities, however you can imagine, no time. And so, you know, it's kind of mind-blowing, that possibility, and how we can begin to experience it now when we go within and seek contact with this spirit, seek to know that spirit. You know, it's kind of a Western thing in Western religious philosophy that we pray. We're always praying. We're always talking to God. In Eastern philosophy, they rarely do that, but they're always listening. They're meditating. You know? So when you marry those two things together, you know, spend as much time listening as you are talking to God, sooner or later you begin to have thoughts that you have to start wondering, is that really, where did that come from? That's an amazing insight. Where and so that process builds, that relationship builds, and you begin to realize, no, that's coming from this indwelling spirit. And once that starts happening for you, then the floodgates open, because now you want more. You know, once you taste that, you want more. At least I do. I did, and so I don't ever want to not have that sense of personal connection with the divine. And then it makes it easier to see it in others. Well, you know, God's no respecter of persons, right? So He doesn't just give me special treatment. If He does it for me, He does it for everybody. Then everybody has this possibility. And it does open up thoughts that, you know, you can begin to see how this world is going to have to turn itself around. We are endowed with the ability to do that. And as more and more of us on the world begin to pay attention to that spiritual power within ourselves, we will create a world of peace, of sustainability. And that process somehow has been set in motion out of love. So it is an incredible, incredible process.
Oh.
Great mystery.
Well, it gives us hope too.
Absolutely.
Just
Yes.
remember that this is the the context in which all this other stuff that's all these turmoils are happening in. But this context is far bigger than our little turmoils. And so it does give hope as long as you keep doing your best to make the connection with that which is bigger than you. Well, I think these are enough questions today. And let's take a little moment to settle ourselves in and see what we can receive from our teachers. Bob, are you going to want to attempt to do some TRing?
Actually, I'm not into that really because I have problems with that when my ego gets in the way most of the time. So,
Okay, it's
but
okay.
I'll be honest with you, I have a hard time TRing, but I do some automatic writing sometimes. That's as close as I can get to it. And I have been able to sit down and write things out, but speaking, I just can't do it.
Okay. Well, that's okay. I just didn't want you to be excluded. If sometime you have written something that you think was a powerful connection that you received and you want to share it in these meetings, that would be okay with us.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay. Just like I shared the one I had from last night. Well, then it'll be John and me. And since I'm the baby TR, I'll just go first so I don't lose my nerve. And John will finish it up for us. Because I'm more comfortable if I do it through my journaling than I am when I'm with a group of people. And I have no idea who I'm going to receive, but the one I feel uh, of most interested in is Mother Spirit. So we'll see if Mother wants to speak through me. We'll go into our stillness, and then at some point I will begin communicating whatever celestial being is making contact with my mind. My beloved, you may speak of me as your beloved too, but it's because of love that we are connected and that we are partners in this life together. So although Deborah hesitates to say that I am her indwelling spirit, she's going to allow that to be the possibility. It is this anxiety that people have and this uncertainty about the validity of whatever message they're receiving that actually creates the roadblock for deeper connections with your divine family. It's like learning to be a public speaker in a Toastmasters club, and you get up for the first time and you've prepared your speech and you're scared to death, even though the people you stand in front of you are cheering you on mentally. They want you to succeed. And so this experience of speaking impromptu, without planning, the message of that which is invisible, but that you know is real, the same anxieties can come up, but I just ask each of us, when you feel them, to take your deep breath and let it out and relax into your body and allow your mind to get calm. Because we are cheering you on. everyone in your celestial family is eager to see you grow and claim the spiritual power that's been given to you. This world will remake itself when more and more people tap in to the divine resources that reside within their very being. And the resources of celestial beings that are there to mentor and help coach you along the way. You are not alone. The world has felt lonely for too long. And your celestial family has always been available, but it's available even more now. And we ask that everyone who hears this message begin to consider the possibility that they too can learn from everyone, their human family and their celestial family, that there is nothing to stop us except our own fears, our own disbelief, and our lack of willpower to make it so. We have an incredible will given to us, and now I'm speaking in plural and not just as Deborah's indwelling spirit, because the Creator only wants those who desire to know Him and be like Him, to build creation into a state of glory that can only happen when Creator and creature work together. And that willpower has to be focused and dedicated for it to be sustained. So we are here today as individuals and as indwelling spirits to connect deeper with one another and to answer the call of our Creator of all, to be all that we are capable of being in support of one another and in support of this grand idea of perfecting until we reach a stage of achievement, of light and life. And even then, we only settle ourselves and congratulate for a moment, and we move forward to see what else we can achieve. I am grateful for the open hearts that have allowed me to be heard and received. And I thank Deborah for her efforts. I am also her indwelling spirit, but I'm also everyone else who is involved in this wonderful mission of spiritual growth and of becoming more and more like our divine parents. Loving, dedicated to embodying the truth, dancing in beauty, sharing our goodness with all. So thank you for hearing me, and I allow another to speak.
Hey, Deborah. This is John. Greetings, my children. I am your elder brother here. Where I go before you, blaze the trail that you can follow into the Father's house. I walked upon your world 2,000 years ago as Jesus. I lived a mortal life. I learned what it was to be human. And the life I lived for you is an example for you to emulate, to learn from. For what I left behind in a nonverbal teaching was the example of how I lived my life. And this is what you have been studying here today. How do you make that contact with spirit such that it becomes a living connection? For I always lived as my life to my apostles and my disciples, an example of one who had a living connection with the Father. This living connection was not an impossible ideal. This living connection is what allowed me to walk amongst you as a person so devoted to doing the will of our Creator, that this divine energy flowed through me and into those around me. And it was attractive to those whose hearts were open. And I was touched by those deeply who came before me with needs, whether it was of a physical affliction, emotional, spiritual affliction. And they had only to call upon me in sincere and honest faith. I could not help but allow this divine energy to flow through me. And many experienced healing. Many experienced the presence of God in their hearts and their minds. You were changed forever by that chance encounter. When I left this world, I did not do so as a sacrifice for some perceived wrongdoing, as an atonement for sin, so that the Father would once again look upon his earthly children. That's a myth, and it's a lie. I simply was allowing my natural life to unfold. And I would not stop revealing the truth, even though it cost me my life, my mortal life. But in yielding up my life the way that I did, I left an even better example. An example of everlasting life, of eternal life, where death is not an end. Death is merely a transition. And so I invite you to this living connection with me and with the Father. This is personal. This is real. This is tangible. And you can experience this living connection if you will but open your heart to faith. With faith and sincerity, if you will go within and seek this contact with your indwelling spirit and with me and Father, with Mother Spirit, you will come to know us as living relationships and an influence in your life. For we are here to help guide this creation into a more perfect reflection of our divine parents' love. And in this process, you will encounter many spirit beings who are let a little above you on this process, and they will always be seeking to mentor you and help you along. But even while you are mortal, you are not bereft of this help. Father has sent his Spirit to live within you. I have given you my Spirit of truth to help you develop your faculties of discernment so you can know truth. Mother Spirit has endowed you with her Holy Spirit. So through the spirit of intuition, you can tell when you are in the presence of truth and beauty and goodness. I simply stand at the door of your heart and knock, and will be there when you open it. For such it always has been with Spirit. Spirit never coerces, never imposes itself. Spirit must be invited. It will only act when you have the faith to ask it to come and teach you and guide you. So I would encourage you to do that, my children. I would encourage you to seek for this divine connection within, to begin to manifest the fruits of the Spirit in your life in such a way that you will look upon your brothers and sisters in this world as members of the spiritual family, and you will learn to have empathy for them, and you will learn to speak to them with compassionate tones of mercy, love, and forgiveness. And together with them, you will learn to overcome many wrongs that this world has experienced. And you will overcome the perpetuation of the idea of revenge and learn to forget. Peace will be the result of these efforts. I'm here with you because, as I admonished you 2,000 years ago, whenever two or more of you are together, and you ask for me to be present among you, I will be there. So it is now as it has always been. Simply by conditioning the space, by issuing an invitation to Spirit. Spirit is always present with you. You will begin to experience this more and more as you exercise your free will to invite Spirit. You set aside a little time every day to allow Spirit to speak to you. You will soon develop the inner ears necessary to hear this voice, to feel this presence, and it will greatly gladden your heart. This is your elder brother, Father, Jesus, saying, please respond to me and allow me to touch you in a way that reveals the Father to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you, Christ Michael.
Well, that concludes this session. It's our first of the practical spirituality groups, in which we will discuss some of the questions and then we will do some transmissions. I will get the transmissions typed up within the week, and I will learn how to put the recording on YouTube. It's available. We meet every 2 weeks unless there's an obstacle in anyone's schedule. So that means our next group would be on the 22nd. Does that work for everyone?
Let me just check my calendar, but I'm pretty sure it will. Yes, that will work for
Okay.
me.
All right.
It should be okay with me too.
All right. Thank you very much, Bob and John, for coming.
Thank you to Deborah for hosting and for making it happen.
Yeah.
Sorry I was late. I'll have my time get away from me this morning.
All
Yeah,
right.
it happens. Well, I'm going to close the meeting then, since I have to do all the, saving of stuff, and I'll hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and
You
I'll see
too.
you in a couple of weeks.
Yes, Deborah, thank you. And say hello to Mike for us.
All right, I will.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.